I may not be 100% right now, and I've had a whole day of hearings, both video and otherwise. So
yeah,
it's the end of a long day, and I'm glad to finish it up with you.
okay. Well, thank you for that. And I wanted to, first and foremost, make sure that we say here at West End Power, thank you for taking the, time out of your busy schedule to educate us with our educational community civic series. So, and I'm going to try my best not to take up a lot of your time, because I don't sometimes, that one, that vaccine, you don't know how it's going to work. So
if I start sprouting extra limbs or turn to dust or something, you'll see it live. Then you'll know.
Thank you. So, okay, thank you for that. So listen, I want to, I told you before about, West End Power's Educational Community Civic Series, making sure that we get to the community and they understand the importance of local elections, local offices, and how they affect our lives 365 days a year. So again, I want to say thank you for being here, and let's get started.
Okay.
All right. So when we first started, I said, hello, Mark. Can you tell us who you are?
Who I am. Okay, just a little background. I'm 52 years old. I'm married. I have three daughters. I'm probably the oldest dad in the race because my youngest is 5. And I live right next door to you in Greentree. So I am familiar with West End Power, all the good stuff you guys have been doing over the years.
Good.
I am a trial lawyer, and I sort of came about this not the traditional way. When I got out of law school almost 30 years ago, I always sort of knew in law school what I wanted to do was help regular people get through the system, turn their lives around, get back on a positive path in what is often a confusing or scary type of situation with the courts. And when I got out of school, I didn't go and work for a giant law firm. I didn't go and work for a company. I didn't go and work for the government. What I did is I scraped together about $800. And I'm not sure I would recommend that to anybody to do it the way I did. And remember, this is back in the days before, even before cell phones, much less the internet and social media. You didn't have a whole lot of opportunity to reach out or to network.
Yeah.
But for what it's worth, that's what I did. And I started my practice at a tiny little office in the Hill District. It was, I think, $200 a month, and took whatever came in the door. And what I focused on was criminal law, family law, and commercial litigation. It's debtor creditor type of stuff, things that, the average person may encounter. And now, we're fast forwarding almost 30 years, and my practice has grown exponentially. And, but I'm still doing those very same areas of the law.
Yeah.
What I am known for mostly is criminal, and my practice isn't just here at home in Allegheny County. I have actually been in 33 out of our 67 Pennsylvania counties over the years, with literally thousands of clients, thousands of cases. Most of these cases have been what we would call a normal everyday case, what most normal people would call fairly exciting. But some of them have reached such prominence that I have been interviewed in, I believe, 20 plus national publications, including New York Weekly, the Chicago Journal, and most recently Forbes magazine. I've also been selected as a Pennsylvania super lawyer. And for those of you who don't know, that's a peer review thing where they send out surveys across the state and ask for nominations from other lawyers. And that places me in the top 5% of trial lawyers in the state. And I've also been selected by the National Trial Lawyers as a top 100 national trial lawyers. So I like to think that I know a little bit about the courts and a little bit about what I'm doing when I'm not in court. Again, I have 3 kids, and they tear me all different directions every single night of the week. But I'm active in charitable organizations like the Mario Lemieux Foundation, USA Hockey Foundation. I'm a hockey coach myself, a former player. That's people say, what's a little known fact? So 35 years and 45 pounds ago, I was a great hockey player. I coach youth hockey. And just I contribute a lot to other local charities, Children's Hospital, Animal Friends, And every year I jump into the river for the pole and plunge to raise money for Special Olympics.
Oh,
So if you're
wow.
around the South Hills, you'll probably see my name on the back of youth soccer jerseys, baseball jerseys, and whatnot. I really think it's our job, just even as citizens in the community, to try and give back to the extent that we can. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, wow. So you told us a lot about you actually, and you're saying a little because
well, that's a lot about me.
yeah. So you've been around for a while, and I'm so glad that you brought up that you do extra community service in the community. I'm glad you brought that up because that's very important. Right now there's 9 seats. There's 9 seats open. There's 43 people running for these 9 seats, and it's at least, exactly. And it's very important to know exactly what everyone has been doing prior to today.
Sure.
So I'm glad that you brought that up as well. Now, being as though that you have been, you have had your 10 toes to the ground for a long time in trial cases and etc. Why Court of Common Pleas? Why Court of Common Pleas, and why now?
Well, why now? I think it's just it's a natural progression of what I've been doing, and on a personal level, my practice has always been about helping people, and you just have such a better platform to be able to go out and help get people back on a positive path, and you have such a greater voice to do that as a judge. Why Common Pleas? Quite frankly, because Common Pleas is the level of court that we have that deals with people. When you get into Superior Court, Supreme Court, any of our appellate courts, you're not really dealing with people. What you're dealing with is, quite frankly, it's paper. You're reading briefs, you're reviewing transcripts, you're reading a lot of law, and but it's very rare, almost unheard of, that an actual litigant will be before the appellate courts unless they're representing themselves. So, that's where you have the opportunity to make the greatest change, I think, and the greatest opportunity to really just help people get through the system is the Common Pleas level, whether it's in criminal court, family court, civil division, even orphans court that nobody really goes to off the bat. That's sort of the retirement area. But that's where you really get to touch the public and really do a lot of good things.
Yeah. And you know what, Mark, I have to say that, your answer for anyone who has been listening to our educational community civic series, I often say, that what you just said was because that's how you reach the people. That's how you affect the people, because if anyone have been listening, that's exactly what I say here at Western Power, is that, right now, these seats affect a person, people, a community, family. This is right now is a very unique situation that Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is in. And, like I always say that, what I've been saying, that this unique situation with these 9 seats have not happened since the early 70s. So we have a huge chance right now to set a precedent for the people that's coming behind us, our families, our neighbors. So I'm glad you brought that up, of your why, that you wanted to, seek the seat of the Court of Common Pleas is to affect the people. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it took me to, the reason that I asked that question. So thank you so much for that. Now I want to ask you about bail algorithms. What is your take on bail algorithms? And then can you explain to us exactly what is that?
Well, when you talk bail algorithms themselves, these have been created by our so-called pretrial services people. And what they're trying to do is predict the future. What is the likelihood somebody is going to commit another crime while on bail? What's the likelihood they're not going to return to court? Things of that nature. I don't know that they're either good or bad. Personally, I think it's a more feel-good measure. Now, granted, in any case where you're setting bail, you have to consider prior conduct. You have to consider a person's prior history. I'm not saying just prior criminal record, but their prior conduct. does somebody have a history of not appearing for court? I mean, if you get, and I've had these clients, that's the thing is, I had one guy that, they always knew where to find him because he would run to California every time he had a case. He'd go in, he'd get arrested for something, they'd let him out on bail. Next thing you know, he's back in a suburb of Los Angeles, and they would pick him up. And it really fostered the relationship between, I think, the Allegheny County Sheriff and the LA County Sheriff, because they always had to go get this guy. So, these are things that you have to, there's just no way around it. Justice has to come to fruition at some point. You've got to be able to secure the return of the defendant to trial. If you're looking more at a cash bail thing, I've always, for 30 years, I've been against this. In fact, I probably with, frequency of several times, a week, or recently a month, since court hasn't really operated quite as fast and loose as it did before the pandemic. I'm in there with, asking for modifications on bail. Because, I don't know if that's where you were about to steer the conversation.
Yeah.
But it's been, my personal belief of it about cash bail is that it's really an archaic system that is sort of an offshoot of back when we had debtors' prisons in the 1700s. The only thing it really accomplishes is it keeps people incarcerated prior to trial, based essentially on their ability to pay, not even their own ability, but the family, because you got to remember the defendant is almost never posting their own bail.
Right.
Which is why it's not a very good incentive for somebody to return to court. Think about it, if I go out, I get arrested, I call you up. Hey, Terry, come down. I need $5,000 to get out of jail. You post $5,000, and then I decide to go to Mexico. I'm not out $5,000. You are.
Right.
There's no incentive for me to return if I'm already predisposed to leave.
Right.
That's the greatest fallacy of it. And in fact, I guess it works like that in many areas of life. And yes, unless you're the person writing the check, you have no incentive. So the bail system is broken in that way because it really, the very thing that it claims that it's for doesn't really work. Just plain doesn't. Another thing it does, it saps taxpayer money that could be so much better used because it really costs about $40,000 a year to house a prisoner. So you get somebody in there and they don't have the money and their family doesn't. They can't even secure a bondsman. So they're sitting in our county jail at $40,000 a year on the back of the taxpayer before they're convicted of anything. So those are my feelings sort of on the cash bail system.
Okay.
What can common pleas do about that? That's what everybody wants to hear.
Right.
And
right.
I'm going to explain something that, and I'm going to be quite candid. I've been around the campaign circuit here and everybody's talking about bail reform and, we need to eliminate cash bail. Let me just tell you, if I could just be real with you.
Please do.
I'm going to tell you how it really works. Okay.
Okay.
You get arrested. You're taken in front of whoever is the on-call magistrate down at night court. Suppose they set $1 million bond for your jaywalking ticket, right? They set some prohibitively high bail. You can't make it. Now, one thing you don't want to do is run into common pleas court right away, because you will lose what we call the second bite at the apple, which is really the first bite at the apple, which is you can then address bond at your preliminary hearing in front of a different magistrate. See, if you go to common pleas, you're not allowed to do that. So suppose you do that, and that magistrate says, oh no, you know what, we're going to keep your bond at $1 million. Or they're going to raise the bail. It's not uncommon. The Commonwealth will ask them to raise the bail. Either way, you can't get out. And so you say, okay, now I can go to Commonwealth or your common pleas court. But that's not even true. What has to happen at that point is your attorney, either, your privately retained counsel or a public defender, they need to file they need to first call pretrial services, then file an administrative review request with them. And if pretrial agrees with you, then great, they can take care of modifying the bond. If they don't, then you file a motion. And only then will you go to common pleas court. And you say, great, there's so many great candidates that hate bail that are running. We'll be in front of one of them. And that's not even true. The way motions court works in the criminal division, it used to work on a monthly basis. We used to have a rolling docket, and every month the judge would change.
Yeah.
And what you ended up with were, you would have a judge that was notoriously pro-prosecution on motions for a month, and there might be 2 motions filed that entire month. Then you get somebody else, and the line is literally out the door every morning at 9:30 in the morning with attorneys looking for bond reductions, returns of property, things like that. So now they do it with a single judge. Judge Manning did it for about 6 years. He was the only guy that would address bail. And now Judge Borkowski has. So literally, as well-intentioned as really I've seen just about everybody running, as well-intentioned as we are, your realistic chance of addressing bond in front of anybody running right now is almost zero. Luckily, we have Judge Borkowski, who is very realistic, very justice-minded, and very good on bond. But it's one of those questions that we get daily as a candidate. What are you going to do about bail? How are you going to rule in bond cases? And my answer is always the same. I can only rule on something that comes in front of me.
Yeah.
And the way the system is set up right now, that's probably not going to happen.
Right. Now I know the candidates that had came to Western Power. I know basically they were basically saying, it's very slim that a bond case will come in front of them, being a court of common pleas. But we also like to make sure that we are educated on all 4 fronts of that question as well, though, So.
And that doesn't mean that we're without power to do anything, okay? Because again, when you are a judge in common pleas court, it does give you that bigger voice.
Okay.
There are meetings of the judges, and if I see, for example, the assigned motions judge is doing something I think it should be done differently, even though those cases are never going to come in front of me, I'm allowed to speak up. I'm allowed to voice that and say, hey, listen, why don't we try this? Or here's what I saw in a different jurisdiction that I practiced in. And I think that really works well. You're allowed to at least do that. You can at least push things in the right direction as long as you have a sufficient background to do it.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, because I want to piggyback off of your answer that you were just saying about, how a court of common pleas judge can speak up on certain things. How can a court of common pleas judge speak up when a jury of someone's peers does not represent them? Or is that something that a judge can speak up on?
Well, in terms of speak up, if you mean attempt to correct the problem while it's going on, we are allowed to do that. Okay. In fact, the Inceptive case was, and I'll see if I remember this correctly, it was 1986 or 85. That's what but anyway, it's called Batson versus Kentucky, when, really the use of peremptory challenges to exclude people based on their race was finally outlawed by the U.S. Supreme Court. And I've had cases where there have been Batson challenges. I have not had a case like that in Allegheny County. Okay. But, that's one way that the judge is able to remedy a problem really as it's going on, or even in many instances before it goes on. And the jury selection procedure is an imperfect system. We try our best, any court tries its best to get a cross-section of the community, but the way they do this is they look at voter registrations, driver's license, whatever, and send, tons of subpoenas out and hope people show up. It's basically what happens. Now, granted, I've tried so many cases that, I would diverge from a lot of the conventional wisdom there. And I think your case is going to rise and fall on how it's presented, how the witnesses testify, and the evidence. By and large, I have found a lot of juries that are uniquely fair that you wouldn't even think would be fair. I mean, I go to these little counties. I've been to, counties you probably don't even realize exist in Pennsylvania, where there are nothing but hillbillies to choose from on your jail, or on your jury rather. And meanwhile, I'll have like the one black guy in town. I'm representing him, and I'm thinking, well, this guy's dead. But no, you try the case correctly, then even the biggest hillbillies will find your client not guilty.
Okay. So I do want to. You touched on what I want to make sure that everyone hears. you had said something about with the jury, making sure that you show up, making sure you know that you, because that's what we have to do as a community. We have to, when we are summoned to appear in as a juror, we have to show up. That's the first part of making sure that we, especially Black men, women, brown men, women, trans, whomever is has a jury of their peers, is that we have to show up when we are summoned. So I'm glad you touched on that.
Right, because years ago when they always try to scare you and say we could put you in jail if you don't show up, and probably 20 years ago they started enforcing that, and they found that all they were doing was jamming the intake pod with people that didn't show up for jury duty, so they stopped doing that. But you're absolutely right, Terry. I mean, if these subpoenas go out, they don't know whether you're rich or poor. They don't know if you're Black or white. All they know, I'm trying to grab something here, is they look at one of these, a street list of registered voters, and they send subpoenas out that are randomly chosen by a computer. And the important part is that people show up. Yeah. If you don't show up, then you can't participate in the system. Yeah. And if the goal is participation in the system, then you know what? Sad but true, you got to be there. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I now want to touch on, I want to touch on addiction in sentencing and mental health in sentencing. And since they, a lot of times they tie in together, how should the courts be looking at addiction and prison sentencing and mental health and prison sentencing?
I think at this point, most courts finally, at long last, recognize addiction as an actual medical issue, an actual disease. And courts are starting to recognize, they're not fully embracing this yet, that all you're doing by putting a drug addict in jail is postponing the inevitable. I have had, I don't know how many hundreds of clients over the years that are severe drug addicts. And, the sentencing guidelines call for jail. They get put in jail. And the second they're out, they're back down on the corner copping more dope. Yeah. You're just postponing a problem. You're not curing it. You're not helping these people. We have in Allegheny County, we have started to put together some good programs, some good diversionary courts, mental health court, for example, drug court, where there is, number one, you're not in jail. And number two, you're getting treatment. Number three, that's overseen by the court, whether it is, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. You're coming back for reviews, and there are counselors and, probation officers that will give reports on how well you're doing. And generally those courts, if somebody is falling off the wagon, the effort is made to get them back on the wagon, not to just throw them in jail. The problem with the diversionary courts that we have several. It's not just mental health or drug. I mean, we also have sex offenders court. We have veterans court, which I helped actually establish here. And the biggest problem I've seen is that these particular courts, you have to plead into it. And what that means is that suppose you're severely addicted to heroin, you go through drug court, you successfully complete drug court, you are now clean, you have gone through therapy, you've gone through counseling, you're following up with NA, your probation is ending, and you didn't spend a minute of time in jail other than the night you were arrested. That's great, but you now have a criminal record. And that prevents you from moving forward in life. It really, truly does. I mean, now you're out, you're trying to find a job or get a promotion or whatever, and that record is always there. I mean, anybody can always find that. We live in an extreme information age. Now, in DUI cases, your first bite of the apple is often the ARD program, where you plead into ARD, but it's not really a finding of guilt. It's probation without verdict, which means it can be expunged at the end. Right. They will keep it on record for purposes of a future offense, but you're not convicted of that offense. I think that's really where our diversionary courts need to go in a lot of cases, because I'm not sure what good it does. Yeah, it's great that you are now getting the treatment that you need. Not so great if you can't support your family. And I also think there's been a societal shift in that regard. And, you know, outside the courts, for example, we have a list here at the office of places that will hire people convicted of felonies, misdemeanors, and convicted of theft, convicted of drugs. We do that for our own clients. And I've seen that list grow over the years. When I first started practicing, you know, nobody would hire you.
Mhm,
Oh, you've
mhm,
got a
mhm.
record, you know, you're stuck, you know, doing menial labor, or you're working fast food for the rest of your life. But, you know, companies are recognizing that, hey, you know what, these people have paid their debt to society. They've been proactive in treatment. They're continuing that. You know, we should give them a chance.
Yeah, yeah.
So on the
So,
court end, like I said, you know, I think they really should run it more akin to the ARD program, where, you know, it's a finding, you know, it's a probation without verdict. So they
mhm, mhm.
can clean up, can get it expunged.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you.
Sure.
Now, can you just tap on? I know you said you've been doing this for over 30 years, and you're
No, for
I think.
almost 30 years.
Oh,
If
okay,
you
for
want to give me
almost.
some extra years of experience, that's fine.
I'm sorry, for almost 30 years. Now, I think you said that your main is trial court, correct?
Right. I do. Yeah, I am a trial lawyer, and that is in the areas of criminal defense, usually some civil case, but a lot of those things don't go to trial.
Okay,
You know,
okay.
I do trials, both the state and federal courts.
And when you say you do trial courts, can you educate us on that? What exactly does that mean?
Well, you know, and I think that's important that you brought it up, because, you know, there's an old joke that, you know, how do you know when there are judicial elections in Allegheny County? It's when every patent lawyer calls themselves a trial lawyer.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm of the opinion that to be to call yourself a trial lawyer, you have to be a trial lawyer. And to be a trial judge, you need to be a trial lawyer. What that means is you go to trial. You pick 12 people and 2 alternates, and you put them in the box, and you represent your client in front of them. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and you do it with such frequency that you really get to know how people are. That's another element of being a good judge. Judge Delavecchi used to say that. He said, you know, being a judge is more than knowing the law. You need to know about people.
Mm-hmm.
So much
Mm-hmm.
of our law revolves around not what I think is reasonable, not what you think is reasonable,
Mm-hmm.
but what the litigants think is reasonable. There are places
Mm-hmm.
in this city where it is perfectly reasonable for somebody to put a chair out in front of their house and defend it like they're fighting the battle of the bulge,
Yeah.
you know, for a
Yeah.
parking space. But if you do that in my neighborhood or your neighborhood, you know, the best thing that can happen to you is that the police come along and
Yeah.
scream at you about it. So, you know, but that's where somebody's coming from. That's their version of being reasonable. You need to be able to figure out where they're coming from, get into their head. You know, why would they do something in this way? You know, and you know, it's the standard is reasonability. So you need to have that breadth of experience to do it. But you know, quite simply, being a trial lawyer means you try cases.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that you plead everything out. You know, and you know, it doesn't mean that you roll over and die, or that you just try non-jury cases, which is the same standard as a jury trial. But I mean, you
Mhm.
really have to have that experience. And there's a, you know, and the reason for that, people say, well, why do you always say you need to be a trial lawyer? You can't just any lawyer do it. Well, you know, I had I had atrial fibrillation a couple of years ago, right? I didn't
Mhm.
call my dentist. I called a cardiologist. And that's the same reason you want a trial lawyer, to be a trial judge. So, you know, that would be my answer in a nutshell.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Mark, you always, you know what. Listen, so we've talked about several topics here, and before I have a couple more questions for you, but before we wrap it up, I want to make sure that I asked you your take on our seniors. You know, what could our geriatric seniors being sentenced 30, 40, 50 years, and maybe they may be 60, or how should the courts, in your opinion, be looking at our senior citizens?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about senior citizens being sentenced, one of the things to be happy about is that not that many seniors do things that are bad enough to get them incarcerated. Now, I have had more than my share of clients that are, 70, 80. I had a guy that was almost 100 once.
Wow.
And I'm representing a gentleman right now, and trial has now been postponed to November. And this guy is in his mid-70s, got stage 4 cancer, lung cancer. And everybody knows he's not even going to make it to trial. Now, if he did make it to trial and we lost, which we wouldn't, because after all, hey, it's me. But had to throw that one out there. But he would be facing some real significant time. And I mean, really, I think it all boils down to the court being reasonable and looking at sentencing alternatives that appropriately reflect the seriousness of the offense, the need for punishment, any ability to correct that behavior. And I think you really need to go, my yardstick is you go with the least restrictive alternative.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about a senior citizen. I guess I have a few senior citizens now, but they're mostly DUIs and stuff like that. They're not gonna go to jail, but you get somebody that has done something very severe, and they're looking at time. I try to look at this as, what would I do if I was a judge? If you get a geriatric person, the jails are not equipped to handle that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, for some of my clients, the federal prisons are very well equipped to handle that. They have entire prisons dedicated just to geriatrics. And I've tried to get people out on compassionate release and things like that because of health issues, because they're aged. And they say, well, no, what we're going to do is we're just going to ship them over here, which is essentially a hospital, but we call it a prison. So, the feds do a notoriously good job of addressing, older citizens in jail. Our state does not do that good job. So I think things that need to be looked at is, if confinement is even warranted, look at something toward house arrest. Rather than incarceration. A lot of these people, it's a fine line, or are they people that need to be in jail, or are they people that really would do better if they were in a community assisted living facility? I mean, where are you going to sentence a 90-year-old person to? Even if the guidelines do say, oh, you got to sentence them to 100 years. Somebody to that. You're essentially, you need to be cognizant of the fact that if you sentence somebody, above 80, 85 years old, you're effectively giving them a life sentence. You don't want to give them a life sentence on something that is not a first-degree murder.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, because I wanted to comment on, what you had said. At the beginning, you had said, one of the first things you had said was compassion or concern, because so I want everyone listening again to understand what is going on right now with these 9 seats, and that we are looking for people to make sure that they have compassion and concern and consideration, we talked about what our youth, we talked about addiction, addicts, we talked about our mental challenge. So I'm glad that, I asked that question, and thank you for your answer. Thank you so much. I think we talked about, you touched a little bit about, being you had a black for an example, a black client in a hillbilly town or something like that. But let's just say in Allegheny County that how should we be addressing when someone walks into a courtroom with a public defender, and compared to when someone walks in a courtroom with an F. Lee Bailey?
Well, if I don't know that that's necessarily the right contrast. I don't want to say that you're wrong, since it is your show.
No.
But it is perfectly possible that the black kid from Homewood has F. Lee Bailey, and you or I have the public defender.
So
now you're talking about a divergence of ability to get representation. So rather more than a racial disparity. I mean, I think and from the bench, I mean, there's not a lot you can do about their choice in counsel or even their ability. What you can do as a judge is make sure it's a level playing field for everybody.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I mean. I'll tell you where I'm coming from is, it sounds callous. I don't care. I
Yeah.
don't care how wealthy you are. I don't care what your race is. I don't care what your religion is, unless there's something about the case that involves any of those absolute traits. You're getting an even playing field. I don't care if it's the public defender sitting there or F. Lee Bailey. You're going to get your day in court. You're going to get a fair playing field, period.
Okay.
And that's how our courts need to operate. There's a reason that the statue of Lady Justice is blindfolded.
Yeah.
I've joked around over the years and said, they really ought to put a curtain up between the bench and the jury box and the litigants so that nobody knows who's who.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that might help.
Yeah. Yeah. And I understand what you were saying, but trust me when I tell you, Mark, it's an extremely important question. From right now that we have to choose, about walking into a courtroom. This is reality in our world, and not just Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but in our world, that when you walk in poor and you walk in not poor, it's just two different outcomes. It's two different situations.
It really is. And it is across the country. And I've seen it for 30 years. I mean, it's just, we're talking about access to the ability to get representation.
Yeah.
And, our public defenders and our conflict counsel and appointed counsel, that can only go so far because these guys are still overworked. They're still underpaid.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of clients that, they'll start out with a public defender, and then somewhere along the line, a family member offers to pay. They'll come to my office. I'll say, what was your problem with the PD? They say, I want a real lawyer. And I always tell them this and say, they are real lawyers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the problem is that, if you're paying me, you're my client, I'm taking care of you. They might have 300 files sitting there on the same day that I'm carrying your file into court. And that's where the unfairness comes into it, because that's where you just can't provide those services, the way they should be under those circumstances.
Yeah.
Really, it is a big problem. And the net effect, as we've seen, is that the disadvantaged or financially disadvantaged people, and unfortunately, they are largely in the African-American community, end up getting convicted at a much higher rate, simply because they don't have that access to counsel.
Yeah.
And, what they're getting is bare minimum representation. Again, I want to make clear, I'm not tearing down public defenders. They have a hard job because they've got 100 files to my one.
Exactly.
Because I'm the guy with one, I can sit here till midnight and work on that file. I can prepare it. I can get investigations done, and they don't have that latitude to do it.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because I with this educational community civic series, I have learned some amazing things that the public defender's office has done here in Allegheny County, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I have learned some programs that they have, started. So it's just a question that we have to ask. And it's a question that we need to know the answer. So I want to thank you for that, Mark. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I mean, one thing I've been in favor of, and I know my colleagues hate me for this, because we say, there's only so many funds to go to a public defender. Only so many funds you can expend on conflict counsel. We still have this problem. And I've actually voiced my opinion that I think, as part of our annual licensing requirements as lawyers, we should do pro bono service. They should assign every attorney X hours of pro bono representation, because that will at least help to clear this backlog and provide good representation.
At
Least in theory. Now, granted, there's going to be a lot of people say, I got to do this case for free. I'm not working on it. But, I mean, that requirement would be a start, at least, to, alleviating the burden that's already on public defenders and providing good representation, solid representation in our criminal courts. And it's as simple as, we're already required to do CLE courses. You have to take hours upon hours of CLE classes. I take extra ones because I'm also certified to do capital cases.
Oh.
But, you add a pro bono requirement to that, and, immediately you're going to see some results there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all about access to justice through, good representation. That's all anybody asks for. And that, I think, is what the Constitution demands.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And so thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. And so I have like 2 more questions for you. And I want to, my assistant is not with us, but I want to make sure that there's no questions in the chat before we go. But one of my questions to you is, how can someone, just in case somebody wanted to ask you something that I may not have asked, maybe they want to volunteer, maybe they want to know more about who you are, how can someone get in touch with you?
Oh, I'm pretty easy to find. But I'll throw it out there. I mean, just go to my website, daffnerforjudge.com. My Facebook page is also Daffner for Judge. If you want to go through the auspices of my law firm, it's daffnerlaw.com. I make it easy for everybody to find me, because God knows a lot of people do need to find me for non-political things.
Yes.
So that was
go ahead. I'm
those
sorry.
are some easy ways, you can always get a hold of me one way or another, usually by calling my secretary, who, God bless her, I mean, works basically 24/7, because she's the one who, I thought she was crazy. I wanted to put an answering service on after hours. No, these people need to talk to somebody. So the calls are forwarded to her cell phone.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And, sometimes she'll come in the morning and say, this so-and-so called me at 3:30 in the morning. What the hell do you think we're going to do then? Well, hey, better you than me. You can always get a hold of me.
Well, that says a lot.
Because you can always get a hold of me.
Yeah, well, see, I mean, I have you on speed dial, so so that's but that says a lot about her character as well. So now, to my understanding, I know I'm not looking at it right. I know I'm not looking at my chat right, and I'm so sorry about that. So if no, I have a different chat, whereas we can't see. My assistant would have been able to see it.
Okay,
but
there's nothing in a Zoom chat.
Yeah. No, yeah. So you put out how someone can get in touch with you, how they, just in case somebody, have something else to ask. And before we wrap it up, Marc, is there anything that you would like to say before we say good night?
No, I think I just want to thank you for doing this. I think it's a great, not only a great opportunity for me, but, I think it's a great service, a great public service. That's what you are known for. And, I want to thank you for continuing to do this. I mean, there's so many candidates, and, most of the candidates are pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's important for people to look and sort of try and get to know the candidates and where they're coming from, because really we are about to change 25% of our bench.
Yes.
We have 43 judges in Allegheny County, and we're about to elect 9 new ones.
Yeah.
And that can go on, depending on the age of the candidates. I mean, I'm 52, but I would still have 23 years before mandatory retirement.
Exactly.
There are some of what we call baby lawyers in the race. Mm-hmm. They may have 40 years.
Yeah.
If they're elected, and no elected judge in Allegheny County has ever not been retained. So, you elect somebody that's very young and they turn out to be terrible, that you might be stuck with that person for 40 more years. Long after you and I are probably dead and buried.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
It is so important in, judicial elections, by and large, they say there's such low information elections, and people don't know anything about the judges.
Yeah.
And it goes off, maybe where you're from, maybe what your last name is, or maybe
exactly.
you heard of somebody somewhere, or maybe you're just picking at random. That's why ballot position is always so important in judicial races, especially when you have 50 candidates on the ballot. People are saying in our race that it's all going to be ballot position. I don't believe it's all going to be ballot position.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of voters out there that literally will look at a ballot, and if it's got 20, 30, 40 people on it, they'll just go straight down.
Yeah. And you're so right. And, I'm so happy that, this is like you said, these 9 seats, that's what 25% of the courts. this is something that is so important, and I'm so glad that Western Power is, at the forefront, along with so many others. I want to say VEAM, the Young Democrats, Allegheny County, BPAP. There's so many NAACP, Coriopolis, that is literally trying to get the word out about how important these 9 seats are, and how this is such a precedent that we may not never see in our lifetime.
Right. The other, one last important thing about that is that, you're not just voting. Everybody wants to talk about criminal justice, but a number of these seats are going to be in family division. There are going to be a few in civil. Those are the divisions that are going to get these judges. So it's really going to encompass every area of the law. We're getting new judges in Allegheny County.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important, because the wrong decisions will poison our court system for potentially 3 or 4 more decades.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I did not ask you about that. It's not all criminal seats here. This, like I said, this affects a person, a people, a family, a community. So this is extremely important. And I'm hoping that everyone listening, tell somebody else to make sure that they, research and understand exactly what's going on here. So and with that, if there's anything else, if there's nothing else that you would like to say, we'll wrap it up and say good night.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Marc Daffner, running for Court of Common Pleas. Thank you so much for taking the time out to come and join us and educate us here at Western Power.
Anytime, Terri.